Welcome back to another episode of the Decision Hour. I'm your host, Adam Bird. Folks, I got a hot one ready for you today. Met this gentleman earlier this year at an event in Washington, D.C., a little event called CPAC. He's an author. He's a producer. I'm even going to go as far as to say he's an expert in political warfare. He's done some documentaries. I chatted with him at CPAC. He was telling me about some of these projects that he's doing. He's known as H.G. Gardner, but friends, such as myself, get to call him Hugo. Hugo, what's going on, brother? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you, Adam?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. It's always a pleasure. I appreciate the time. So when we met up earlier this year, you were telling me about some interesting documentaries and stuff that you're working on and have worked on. But before we get into that, let's kind of backtrack a little bit for my listeners and get an idea, who's this Hugo cat that he's talking to today? So who is Hugo? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I started out 18 years ago as being a contractor, but at around 2008 or so, I met a wonderful gentleman who's at that time was a city councilman for the city of Ventura, where I lived. His name is Neil Andrews. I dedicated my book to him. He was a member of Mensa. And what he was hanging around with me about, I have no idea. But we saw each other eye to eye. I worked on the presidential campaign for Senator McCain. Worked on Trump's campaign here in California. I was part of the Republican National Committee nationwide and the California Republican National Committee, and I got pretty involved. But more importantly, it was around, I guess, it was shortly after Obama became president that I noticed something starting to happen, especially when he made the claim 5 days before he was elected. He says, and I quote, "In 5 days, you will witness the fundamental transformation of the United States of America." Mm. And from there, it just took off. In fact, that statement rattled around in my head for like a week. And once I figured out what he was talking about, it terrified me. And from there, I run amok. I wrote the book, The United States Socialist Republic, about the political warfare. It says down here at the bottom, the liberal Marxist machine and the men, method, and means to fundamentally transform the country. And I go through how basically 40 years ago, a single gentleman came out of hiding named Bill Ayers and hiding with
hold on
childhood education. And he went
pause. Go back to we had a little bit of a hiccup here with stuff. So give me just a second here. Go back.
No problem.
Start with Bill. Go back and start with Bill Ayers.
Gotcha. It was actually 40 years ago. I kind of pointed out in my book where the Marxists in this country actually it started with Bill Ayers in 1984 when he came out of hiding, and he came out of hiding with 2 master's degrees in early childhood education, and he went right after our children. But more importantly, he did that kind of in a I guess what you might say, a covert or a veiled way. He was instructing the teachers to groom the children, and from starting in kindergarten to groom them to be social activists, social justice activists. Yeah. It's a longer story. You can see it in my book, but that's where the whole thing started. And then you see 30 years later, you see Antifa. And the, I guess, not so much the violence, but the pushback against the government. And I'm going to say this right now, and probably, anger a bunch of people. Our government works. I'm a former appointed public official. I've seen and I know our government's working. It's working right now, whether you think so or not. I know many, many people in Congress.
Working for our favor, or just working?
It's
working.
Just
in general?
Working.
Okay, fair enough.
The government is not supposed to work in our favor. It is supposed to govern the country, legislative, judicial and executive branches.
Okay.
It is not supposed. It's supposed to be very confined. It's supposed to do its job, fix your streets, hand out justice as fairly and as possibly and justly as possible, et cetera, et cetera. But I know congressmen and senators that right now are working to hold this country together, and you're not getting that information. There's so much censorship going on that the people aren't getting the whole situation. With a handful of Marxists within our country are pushing the narrative, and they're censoring people, and you see that with the Biden administration.
Well, why are
the Marxists put Biden in place?
Why are they censoring the people though? Because you look at now, we're in the information age, right? We have been for the last couple of decades, but you look more importantly, I'm talking about social media and the mainstream media. Mainstream media runs these psyops, if you will, and then the social media platforms, the big four gorillas that are out there,
the Googles, the YouTubes,
the
Facebooks,
the
TikTok, the Instagrams,
they all tell you, you're going against policy or this, that. Honestly, the TikTok one is I get why people are upset about that because it's owned by China, but now the U.S., now that our government's trying to force them to sell their parent company, and I'm not necessarily, I'm kind of against that in my sense. I said this last week on a show, is that it's because I think the government doesn't have control over it, so they want it turns into a control thing. That's just my opinion. But if you look at
they want to regulate,
right? If you look at Facebook and the Meta or whatever, they if you say something that they don't like, then you get shadow banned or worse, you get banned completely.
Yeah, and that's been the case with YouTube and various other social media outlets. But here's the interesting point. It's been since probably, I would say for now, well over a decade, the FBI and the DOJ, at the behest of the Marxists within our federal government, and this is just a handful of Marxists within our federal government, have been censoring content. But more importantly, here's what is really happening. The FBI has actually gone to Google and said, hey, we need this information. Do you see anybody that's getting stupid, that's putting out misinformation? We need to curb that. Well, we want to, Google will say, well, we're trying to, go ahead.
What classifies as misinformation, though?
That's the whole thing.
Who's the one that's giving the definition of the misinformation?
That's what I'm saying. It's arbitrary. A guy standing in a closet is going, that's misinformation.
Yeah.
And here's the interesting point. You have the Biden administration put the Disinformation Governance Board together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who decides what's true and what's not? But that's where it's kind of arbitrary. But more importantly, I want folks to understand, and I had to figure this out myself. I go, Jesus, what in the hell is going on? There's a massive censorship, and this is what I talk about in Defining a Nation, our new documentary that's coming out on July 6th. It's going to be the worldwide premiere. The censorship program, basically by the FBI and the DOJ under Garland, has literally for well over the last decade has gone to Google and these various other news, social media outlets and threatened them. We want you to give us this information. If you see anybody putting out stuff like Hugo Gerner or Adam, you guys, or anybody that's putting out this information, disinformation, or information that we think is just totally absurd, we want you to give us that information. And Google will say, well, hey, hang on a minute. We really can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, then the FBI, the FBI say, well, okay, I tell you what, we're going to litigate your ass. We're going to take you to court, and we'll get that information, and we'll take you down. So basically, they threatened with litigation these social media outlets, and they say, just give us the information, okay? Then here's what happens. When they hand over this information, when they possess this, they're violating the rights of the American citizens. So they go immediately to get a subpoena. Hey, we got some people here that are talking about this and various other stuff, and we need to get a subpoena. They give them a subpoena, then they actually legally possess it. But they do this beforehand. Now that's a handful of marks, like the Garland, DOJ, and stuff like that. But once they get this information, dissenters, then they can control the narrative. They don't want these YouTubes and these other social media outlets pushing a false narrative or what they don't want. The narrative that they want is that conservatives and Republicans, basically, and the right, they're conspiracy theorists. They're putting out, don't get vaccinated. This is where all this started. Don't get vaccinated. Well, here's the interesting point. When the vaccination system came out, you can turn down medical procedures. That's your right. Then they called it the pandemic of the unvaccinated. That's where it really became, just whacked out. People, the rights are being violated. Then you got a guy like Gavin Newsom shutting down the state after President Trump said, let's just shut it down for 2 weeks, see if we can drop the curve. Governor Newsom and these other governors shut down the states indefinitely. And I can show you how you can push back. You've got to be ready. We do this in our documentary on Defining a Nation. There's a way to shut down the office and literally handcuff the governor's office where he can't do diddly squat, and you push back in force. And guess what? You can hold on to your liberties. It's a longer story.
Yeah, but when you say that, when you put it that way, that makes it sound like there's a lynch mob coming for these politicians that are currently in office, and that their office can be run over without any thing. I mean, I've seen things now on social media where you have guys going out and they're doing like these First Amendment audits in these federal buildings, public places, by the way. And they're getting kicked off, or they're getting arrested for trespass and all this other stuff. And a lot of the people, the average norm person, just doesn't realize that you have the right to be there. Your taxes pay for that building,
right?
So
but you don't want to put a target on your back. There's ways to peacefully push back, and also, if I may say, when you have, and I need to be more specific. You see the Governor Newsom, what he did was he shut down the state. Okay, this is an example. He shut down the state and left it open-ended.
Right.
That's a violation of your rights. When he uses the Emergency Powers Act, they can basically suspend or revoke your liberties, all of them. You can't go anywhere. Stay in your home. Well, now, if you do this is what President Trump did. Let's just try to drop the curve. Everybody stay home for a couple of weeks. Let's see if we can drop the curve. Okay, fine. That's fine. But Newsom left it open-ended. The American people can push back. They have to be ready. When this is what they want to do. They want to get to the point where they can control the narrative, control the people, and basically control the system. It's all about calculating and controlling outcomes.
Right.
This is a longer discussion. Right. And when Governor Newsom did that, all the American people had to do is, I'm a former appointed public official. He has 72 hours to notify the American people, say, hey, I want to shut down the state. People of California, what do you think? He's supposed to do that, even with the Emergency Powers Act. The American people, if they pushed back, he couldn't shut down the state at all. Over a quarter of a million people, business people here in the United States during COVID went out of business permanently. 250,000. That is insane, and it's because of the governors and guys like Governor Newsom. But more importantly, I'll continue real quick. The American people can push back, and they can do it peacefully and righteously and within the law, basically within the legal system, and just say, hey, you're not going to do this. We're going to push back, but they have to be ready, and they have to do it in mass.
Let's take a step back for a minute, Hugo. Those that are listening right now, documentary's coming out. You said July 6th.
Yes, sir. Defining a Nation.
Defining a Nation. And your books right now. Let's even back up further. How many books do you have out right now? Where can people and people that are listening, they want to reach out to you, they want to connect with you. Where can people find you?
If you go to www.preservingamericaepac.com, preservingamericaepac.com. EPAC stands for Ensure the Preservation of America and our Constitution. It was back right after I put the book out, United States Socialist Republic, that I put EPAC. I mean, just shortly thereafter, I put EPAC together, and we need. I don't think I can. I would never consider myself to try to saving America. I can't save America. All I want to do is keep what I got.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So preserving. Listen, if you guys are listening to this right now, it means you're already on the internet. So just open up another browser. Preserving America, EPAC.com. Get his books there. You can see and learn more about this young man.
Thank you.
On that website, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about the documentary because it's coming out this summer, and then that's literally right around the corner.
It actually, we released it in January locally, but it's going to be worldwide premiere on January 6th.
I'm sorry, worldwide premiere.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay, so let me ask, how did the premiere go when you released it locally?
The group of 200 people gave me a standing ovation.
Wow.
That's great. It outlines the basic elements and tactics of political warfare, how it's being waged in this country, what it takes to destabilize and deconstruct or demoralize and deconstruct a nation state, and the 5 basic elements, the solutions to thwart this attack, this war that's being waged on this country. This is a war. It's called political warfare. It's an asymmetric, unconventional type of warfare that is just as lethal as a hot war, but without the destruction, without the bombs and bullets. It is called ideological subversion.
So let me ask you this. Is it safe to say, because what I hear you talking about, Hugo, and you and I have known each other for a minute, what I hear you saying is that I'm hearing a lot of like the World Economic Forum, the G7, the 2030 agenda, we're going to build these 15-minute cities. I'm hearing a lot of that in this conversation right now. And
in our first document, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please, because I think that's what's happening.
In our first documentary, America on the Precipice, I outlined in the very beginning of the documentary the advertisement that the World Economic Forum put out. You will own nothing, and you will be happy. America will share its dominance on the planet with other countries. You live close to where you work, etc. This is about calculating and controlling all outcomes, getting to a point where there's not so much chaos, but more importantly, you will own nothing and you will be happy. This is exactly about ownership. This is where we take in the defining a nation, what's really going to happen. But more importantly, we talk about the World Economic Forum. That's where this whole thing is going. It falls under the guise. In fact, in my book, starting on the first chapter, I talk about a guy named Robert Mueller, not Robert Mueller, Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller was the protagonist at the dawn of the United Nations back in 1948. He was part of the French resistance. He saw the horrors of war, and he came to the United States and was on the ground floor. He was not one of the founders. He was on the ground floor, and for 50 years, he was the guru that everybody went to that was part of the United Nations. And he had 3 main points: no poverty, no hunger, no war. That's where the Sustainable Development Goals came out of the United Nations, and that's where that is all of it. Everything surrounds the Sustainable Development Goals.
So, Hugo, who is the puppet master
There's no puppet master. It is a whole bunch of like-minded people working as a machine. I call it the Marxist machine, to get to the point where they can calculate and control all outcomes. The Sustainable Development Goals. What is sustainable development? And I'm going to ask you that question. What do you think sustainable development is?
Putting people in a controlled area.
Sustainable development is developing at a sustainable rate. Meaning, okay, if we're going to go into the future and we're going to build houses and build countries and develop and move and improve our quality of life, that's developing, we got to do it at a sustainable rate.
Right.
Well, why do we need to do that at a sustainable rate? Because we're running out of certain resources. We don't want to be scratching our heads, go, wait a minute, what do you mean we're out of cement? Well, we're out of cement. We don't have the minerals to do that. We don't. Yeah. So everything stops. The point, I'm using that as an example. I have a document in my hands right now. This is the British Petroleum world. Let's see. It's called the Statistical Review of World Energy. And on page 16, it talks about what's called proven reserves. This is from 2021. And many people are going to, Hugo, this guy's, you're insane. Well, the elites know this. Why do the elites want to move this planet in a particular direction called sustainable development? Because we're getting low on proven reserves of oil. What are proven reserves? They're the real kind of, I guess what you might say, sort of inexpensive oil. It is only $15 a gallon, $15 a barrel to get out of the ground. But there's a whole bunch of resources of oil on the planet. But if we had to depend on that, the price of fuel at the pump would be $100 a gallon. Right now, with the proven reserves getting out of the ground, gas is $4 or $5 a gallon, right? We only have there's 1.6 in this report. There's 1.6 trillion barrels of proven reserves that we know of on the planet. When we burn up 35 billion barrels of oil every year, moving goods around the planet, getting cars, we have 47 years left of relatively inexpensive oil. It would shake up the economy unbelievably if we got to a point where we're out of gas. I'm sorry, sir, we're out of gas. We'll go to the gas pump, fill up the tank. Sir, we're out of gas. This is what sustainable development is all about. And the next step will be quantum supremacy. In our documentary, Defining a Nation, we talk about just what was released just before Christmas last year. Michio Kaku talks about quantum supremacy. What is that? He said, and I quote, any country or company that masters this technology will control the world's economy. This is about calculating and controlling outcomes. When quantum supremacy will be able to control all outcomes. They'll be able to calculate it, and they know going in what is the end result, and they will be able to gear everything towards more efficiency, more profits, and you will move to what's called stakeholder capitalism, and the United States will be owned by the federal government. That's a longer story. If you want to get into that, we can. You're going to talk about insanity, but watch out in September of this year, the United Nations is going to declare a global climate change emergency. Biden has already signed on to it. This is the White House Prepare Action Plan to fight and put all our resources towards fighting the global climate change emergency.
Well, yeah.
And they will attempt to federalize the United States.
Yeah, he recently put in what was it? There was an article that came out in August. He signed a bill that they're going to vacuum the atmosphere of CO2. They vacuum. Not my words. I literally read the report and it says we're going to vacuum the CO2 out of the air because
There you go.
because the
There you go.
CO2 is part of we have such a the problem is people don't understand, it's like the more CO2 that's being let off and the emissions that's being let off, and America is not the dirtiest country, let's be, as far as that goes, but the more CO2 what they're not measuring is the radiation side of it. You can keep letting off CO2 right now. It's not going. They're not measuring the right things. And this was done by this is a study that's currently going on, but they brought out a report. I forget who's doing the study. Anyway, they brought that out, and they said, yeah, they're not measuring the right stuff. They're not measuring radiation levels, blah, 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 blah. You know, they sit there and say, well, we got to get rid of all beef because cow farts are letting off too much CO2. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
CO2, if we didn't have CO2 in vast quantities in our atmosphere, we wouldn't have any oxygen.
Thank you. Listen, I was a business major in college, and my attitude was a D will get you a degree. Like, I didn't, you know, I pride myself more on street smarts and common sense than stuff that I haven't used when I went to college. So,
do you remember a guy named William F. Buckley?
Yes, I do.
He had a show called The Firing Line.
Yep.
And he's quoted as saying, I would rather have the first 100 people out of the phone book running this country than all the professors at Harvard.
Oh, yeah.
You can have a degree in everything, okay, and be the dumbest person on the planet.
Here's the thing, folks, and I've said this
all about
before
common sense
in other shows, is that there's a lost art of critical thinking. And the problem today is we get so consumed with social media and mainstream media and like, oh, well, yeah, it's happened to me this past weekend. It's like, well, you know, all the news channels are talking about this, and this, and why Trump's bad or why this person's bad or whatever. Okay, well, if all of the news stations are saying the same thing, that should be a red flag first and foremost. Why is that? And then when you start going down the rabbit hole, which I've done the last 6 years, you start to see like, well, what is it? Like 83% of the news organizations that are out there are owned by the same company, and then the other ones are owned by the other, you know, umbrella. So it's kind of like you understand why you start following the money, you start thinking for yourself. You quickly comes to the realization that, oh, this is why they're trying to, is what Hugo's been trying to say this whole time, is that they're getting to the point where they want to control the narrative, and that's how it is. 15-minute cities. Listen, don't take my word, don't take our word for it. Look this stuff up. That's why you got those pocket computers that you carry around with called cell phones. Go look this stuff up. Google 15-minute cities. See what it says. I guarantee the majority of the stuff that you look up, a lot of it's going to go back to the World Economic Forum.
It all goes back. It all goes back to sustainable development.
Right. And here's the funny thing. I don't remember voting on putting those assholes in charge. Ever.
Nope.
So who's to say? And this is where, you know, our God-given rights here in the United States, and mind you, the United States, we are still the youngest out of the bigger countries that are out there. We're still the, you know, I call it the experiment, if you will. And you look and you follow the bloodline, follow the money. If you're gonna follow the money, you're gonna see why things are being the way they are. China is a big thing that's happening. I think that's they're going to take over Taiwan, or they're going to attempt to take over Taiwan here soon. That's in the 100-year marathon. That book came out years ago, and it explained it in there. We are, by 2040, China's goal is to be the #1 country,
dominant force on the planet,
in the world by 2040, and that's in a plan over a 100-year stretch that they wrote, and they give you the blueprint on it.
Did you know about the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, right?
That doesn't sound familiar.
The Belt and Road Initiative is a plan that was put into motion about 18 years ago. About 18 years ago, the Chinese Communist Party owned and controlled about 12 container ports on the planet. Now they own 36. They own 2/3.
Yeah, all the ones in most of the ones in Africa. They own one of the bigger
all
ones
over the
in
country.
L.A. I believe
They're building a new one. The Northwest Passage has opened up because the ice is melting up there a little bit, and up in the northeast portion of Canada, they're building another container port so that they can go over the Northwest Passage. But they own 2/3, own or control 2/3 of all the container ports on the planet.
right.
That is about an economic. He who controls the seas controls the trade.
Yeah, and that's a chess move. We've been playing marbles, and China's been playing chess.
Exactly.
Like it's not even in the same thing. But listen,
this ain't chess. This ain't checkers. This is chess.
Yeah, Hugo, we're coming up on time. I want to get everybody to your website, Preserving America. EPAC.com. Mouthful. Get over there. Stay tuned because he's going to have the worldwide premiere documentary coming out July 6th, and we'll have all these notes. We'll have his contact information in the show notes below as well, so you can reach out to him. Go ahead.
Last but not least, if you go to our website right now, you can watch Defining a Nation for free. It's my gift to everybody that cares about this country. You can watch it for free. Preserving America, EPAC.com. Click on the header that says documentaries. It's yours for free.
All right, we'll make sure we get
brings
that
the
in
problem there. And brings solutions.
We'll put that in there as well. Hugo, I got one more question for you. One more. You're on a show called The Decision Hour. We have to make decisions every day. Name a time in your life when your feet were on the line and you had to make that decision. What was it, and what was the atmosphere like at that time?
Goes back to 2008, right before President Obama was elected in November, 5 days before, when he said, "You will witness the fundamental transformation of this country." I stood at the line and wait a minute, what is he talking about? He's not talking about improving the country. He's talking about taking the foundation of this nation and transforming it. There was basically, real quick, just recently in 2021, the Biden administration directed the National Archives Administration to put a disclaimer on our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. There is a disclaimer that was put on those documents, and basically that is the first step to delegitimize our foundation.
I'm writing that.
That's
down.
where I stood at the line. That's where I decided to make a decision. I'm going this direction, and I haven't stopped. I put 6 hours a day, every single day, into understanding the Marxist political warfare being waged on this country and how we can win it. Our documentary shows how we can win this documentary. The next 12 months is going to be messed up.
Is there hope for us still?
Absolutely. I'm going to say this. We will win this war. We're too many smart people. The people are going to win this war. Not politicians. You and I, the people will win this war. I guarantee you. Watch what happens. It's going to get messed up. The next 12 to 14 months is possibly redefine this country where we're going to win it. I guarantee.
I love it. Hugo, always a pleasure, brother. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Adam. Love you, buddy.
Love you too, man. And listen, folks, go check it out, Preserving America, EPAC.com. Check out again, free. If you go there now, you can watch the the documentary now on the website. He's given that to you. Go check it out. Go check out our parent company, Heroes Media Group. Go check out all the shows and events that we're going to be at later on this year. That's all the time we got today, folks. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.